All right, hello, and thanks for joining us for today's Forgotten Foundations of Fundraising webinar. If this is your first time joining us for the series, feel free to check back on our past webinars on foundations fundraising and capital campaigns so far this year. Both of those offer a wealth of information for you. You can find them on our YouTube channel if you just search for Philanthropy Daily on YouTube. And again, for those of you who don't know, I'm Austin Detwiler. I'm the managing editor of Philanthropy Daily, which is sponsoring the webinar today. Philanthropy Daily is an online journal of news and opinion focused on philanthropy and civil society. Our mission is to strengthen civil society and bolster the voluntary associations that are essential to our democracy. So one way we do that is by supporting fundraisers in their work. On our website, philanthropydaily.com, you'll find our opinion pieces, but you'll also find practicalities. So these are short articles that provide useful advice for fundraisers like yourselves to just help you in your day-to-day work, whatever specific area of fundraising you might be working in. And of course, our webinar series is another way we do this by bringing knowledgeable consultants and fundraisers together to answer your questions and help you think about new tactics and strategies and ways to improve your work as a fundraiser. So today we're discussing the art of direct mail and integrated fundraising. If you've been following Philanthropy Daily recently, you'll have noticed a series of articles over the past month or so from Eric Streif and from Carmen Natschke, who is with us today. Eric and Carmen are both driving home the digital acceleration that happened when all of us were hunkered down at home in 2020 and earlier this year, staring more at our screens than ever before. So whatever that means for the strength of our neck muscles and our social lives, its implication for fundraisers is certainly that having a strategic digital presence is dramatically more important than it was, say, 18 months ago or 2 years ago. I'm willing to bet, for instance, that your inbox is a lot busier than it used to be, with businesses, nonprofits, probably even churches, sending a lot more digital communication than ever before. And yet digital cannot come at the expense of traditional. So as I wrote in an earlier email you maybe saw, we might be on our phones more, but that doesn't mean any of us ditched our actual mailboxes or that anyone else has stopped sending mail. People are still reading and receiving mail, and the majority of revenue is still generated by direct mail, and it's going to take a long time for that to change in general for nonprofits. So digital communications need to be additional to traditional tactics, not a replacement. So hence this magic word, integrated. We need to be using multiple channels to reach your audience and making sure that those channels are cohesive, coherent, and mutually supportive. So to tell us more about this, we have two excellent guests, not just me. We have Carmen Natschke and Mark Diggs with us today. Carmen and Mark are both experts in direct response and have been serving various roles for many years now. Mark is currently a senior consultant in American Philanthropic's direct response group. Before coming to American Philanthropic, Mark worked for other direct mail agencies and has led direct mail programs for several large nonprofits with robust, sophisticated programs. And today, Mark is leading several large direct mail programs for his clients. He's truly an expert in this area. Carmen comes to American Philanthropic as well after a career in digital marketing for several major for-profit companies that you maybe heard of, like Martha Stewart Living or IKEA, which you've maybe seen around. Carmen has extensive experience in digital marketing, social media marketing, digital strategy, and everything related to what you're trying to do in your digital fundraising work. So Mark and Carmen will lead us through the basics of integrated fundraising using mail and digital tactics, and then they're going to take your questions. Just a bit of housekeeping before I hand it over to Mark and Carmen. At the bottom of your Zoom screens, you'll see a chat function or a Q&A function. You can send us any questions through the chat or the Q&A. After Mark and Carmen give their initial presentation, we'll take any of your questions. Feel free to send them in at any time using either one of those. They'll come privately to me, and we'll handle them one by one when we get there. With that, Mark, I'm going to hand it over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Austin. Welcome, everyone. It's just it's such a joy and a pleasure to have you take your time out of your day to join Carmen and I for this webinar, and I hope it's productive and useful for you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up, just for the opening section, we'd like to give just a short presentation on sort of high-level values, high-level strategic concerns, why we do what we do and how we do it, some principles. And then we're hoping that the rest of our time can be used getting into more of the nitty-gritty and the details of what we're talking about. So, the art of direct mail. I'd like to open up with this quote. Fundraising is proclaiming what we believe in such a way that we offer other people an opportunity to participate with us in our vision and mission. That's from Henry Nouwen, and I believe it's from his Spirituality of Fundraising, a wonderful little booklet that really highlights the nature of what fundraising can be and what it should be. So it's a very aspirational concept. It's the opposite of begging for funds. It's quite something much more noble and aspirational. In this case, we're helping people reach the goals that they care about, people that want to make the world a better place and make the world something they would like to see, and to help create that world. So it's a great privilege to be able to join with others and come together to make something like that happen. So we're going to focus on direct response, but there are several prominent categories or channels of fundraising. Foundations is a significant channel. Individual major gifts, of course, is significant, but direct response is its own large category. What's great about direct response is it's a way you can reach large groups of people simultaneously, in real time and together. And that's a wonderful advantage of direct response. The nature of direct response, what makes it direct and responsive, is essentially whenever you add any kind of a component that's a response component, so a telephone number, a return address, a landing page, an email, anything that your donor or constituent can use to reply back to you, then it's become direct. And what's so wonderful about direct response, we'll get into that a little bit, but just the nature of how accountable it is and measurable. So direct response is a proven fundraising method. So there's a long history of direct response fundraising being effective and useful throughout organizations' life cycle in terms of building up the support base for programs. By combining the disciplines of art and science, we're engaging donors through multiple channels. And I just want to highlight two of the channels that we list here: direct mail and email. And Carmen, I'd love for you to weigh in on the email side and just describe why are those two channels as more prominent and more effective than some of the others?
They're more prominent and effective is because they're actually very similar. They're one-on-one personal communication with a prospective donor or the donor, and they actually build on each other. So they reinforce each other's message through different paths. For one, it comes to your mailbox at home. The other one will reach you on your desktop or on your mobile. So they're very similar, and where they vary is in how the message is packaged. You look at shorter messages for email, where you have direct mail. Sometimes the letters can be up to 8 or more pages, right, Mark?
Yeah, so particularly for policy type organizations, yeah, it depends on the organization, but yes.
It depends on the organization, and we could say the same thing for email. And they have a lot of similarities in the way the audiences are segmented, so they're very complementary methods and channels to reach prospective donors and engage with current donors.
And would it be fair to say, Carmen, that the other categories that we list here, social media, website, SMS, that those can be also they can be destinations in and of themselves, but they're also supportive?
They're very supportive, and they can be destinations just of themselves. The ideal situation, since we're talking about integrated, is that we use all of these, every single path and channel that we can, to reach prospective and current donors. That way we reach them where they're at. And that's a key thing to keep in mind as you look at integrated fundraising. We want to be able to offer multiple opportunities to prospective and current donors to engage with our organization or with nonprofit organizations.
And one of the things I want to say about that is in terms of reaching donors where they're at. You know, I love the analogy in terms of fundraising. The analogy of fundraising is like a river. Fundraising not like a lake or a pond or an ocean. It's like more like a river, and a river flows, and the river has motion to it, and the part of the river that was here today, here yesterday is no longer here today. It's moved on, and the reason that analogy works is because a lot of certainly in terms of direct response in general fundraising, the most of giving is made out of discretionary funds. So and those funds tend to be spent, but they're not going to be held onto. They'll be spent during that month or by the end of the month. So once that period is gone, that opportunity is gone. So you're trying to catch the donor at the right time, at the right place, with the right message.
Yeah, and the other thing, if I may add to this, is by offering donors multiple paths and multiple opportunities via different channels, you're putting your message out there in a way that it differentiates from maybe another organization who only does direct mail and doesn't want to try email or doesn't want to try digital. So in a way, it's also a competitive advantage, I would say, for nonprofits and for all organizations actually to have an integrated approach.
Yep, that's great. So here's another great quote from Jeff Brooks, creative director and writer extraordinaire. Fundraising is both a number-driven science and a heart-driven art. And what I love about that quote is it lays out the necessary attributes and skills that you need to be able to do fundraising well, but also infers like the nature of fundraising and the nature of relationships and how fundraising is based on relationships. So that's the heart-driven art part of it. And here's a good example of what we're talking about, just to flesh it out a little bit more. So if you were to describe what the art is of what we do, that's the creative, the storytelling, the artistic design. And if you were to talk about the science of what we do as fundraisers, that's data, that's intelligence, experimentation and testing, algorithms, or repeatable methodologies. So it's really the database marketing side of things, which I love both of those. You know, art is more of a right brain experience, and science is more of a left brain activity. But art plus science is where you apply that knowledge and you apply that wisdom and you apply those abilities together. And so, Carmen, I just want to ask you, what does art plus science mean?
This is interesting because we were having this conversation yesterday, and I love art. I'm by no means an artist, but I love art. And I was thinking about Leonardo da Vinci, and he's a perfect example of someone who actually blended both art and science. He was an artist, a great artist, and he was a great scientist. He was able to take what he studied and what he learned in human anatomy and create a form in art, the human body in a visual form where he could share it with others. He was able to communicate things that are difficult to understand using art, and he used that to teach and to spread the word about human anatomy. In this day and age, and there are very few of us who are perfectly balanced like Leonardo da Vinci as far as being artistic and science-based, but within our organizations, if you look within your organization, you'll see that you have, for example, a writing team. They're the creative storytellers. And then you have the data team, like Mark was talking about, who gathers information. And in a real life example, for example, as a digital strategist, I look at a lot of data. I analyze a lot of data. And the reason I do that is because I want to learn about the audiences that an organization may want to target with their fundraising efforts. So the kind of data I look at is some of it's behavior-based, some of it's numbers like demographics. So what I do is I take that information, I create personas and different audience segments, and then I map their journey across an integrated pathway from direct mail all the way to even social media and mobile apps. But that's about where my creativity ends. So I hand that over to the creative team, the storytellers, and they're able to craft compelling stories and narratives that take into account all the data that we've put together, and it's put in a form where people understand. And then they know what kind of offers to make because we have the behavioral data. So they know what kind of language to use to craft those offers, and also to craft call to actions that people, it triggers a behavior immediately to take action. For example, donate one time or upgrade your donation tier if you're part of a donor club. So that's how I would explain being able to meld art and science together.
You know, I love the word craft that you just used, because I think in terms of craftsman, you know, a craftsman combines, you know, skill and expertise and technical ability and knowledge along with their artistry. And that's what, as strategists, it's our job to pull it all together and to line up the right offer with the right list, the right message to the right people at the right time. And that's where it all comes together. All right, let's focus in a little bit more and start talking specifically about direct mail, because I think a lot of these principles, some of these categories apply specifically to direct mail as a channel, but a lot of the principles apply to direct response as a category. So why direct mail? Why do we do direct mail? One of the attributes of direct mail is that it drives engagement. It's very good at doing this. It tends to be superior and have very predictable results in this regard. And by superior, I mean response rates can be much higher than an email in many examples, and you can do it again either in the next appeal later on in the year, or repeat that success at the same time next year. And a good example of that would be the membership mailing. We use a format for several of my clients where it's a membership card that they get, and we just over the past 3 years we've been getting a better response rate from one particular membership card package. We mail out the same package or similar package at the same time every year, early in the year, obviously. And we update the card. Of course, the list is updated as well. And we had over 11% response on the last membership card that we did. So it's very, very interesting. And we're obviously looking on the back end at the data and the response, and trying to understand better why it was as high as it was. Why did it come in over a 3-month period? Looking at some major gifts that came in as well. So that's a good example of what I'm talking about. Build a broad donor base relatively quickly. That ties into that first point where, you know, when you have the ability to have predictable results and higher engagement, that's obviously a great way to bring new people in as well. In the context of donor acquisition, direct mail is a major workhorse for building donor files, for bringing in new names. So that's why we use it. That's why we continue to use it. Tell the story and make an effective case for support. So this gets into what we said earlier about length of medium and the ability to tell a longer story. Now, sometimes you go in the other direction and you try to tell the story visually, and you use less words in a direct mail package. And you could talk about examples of how to do that. But you do have the capability to tell longer stories and to get a little bit more in depth. That works especially well with policy organizations that we talked about earlier, where you're getting into some more complex topics, more involved topics, and you have a donor base that's interested in that. But just in the terms of storytelling, to the average person, you've got a chance to tell a story and make that effective case for support. You've got more room to do that. And the last 2 points: increase revenue, cultivate relationships for years to come. That plays into the predictability, it's sustainable, it's repeatable. And then physical representation of your brand, shelf life, and retention. So, you know, direct mail, it's a physical medium, right? And it means it's in three-dimensional. You know, and you think of mailings as letters, as being flat and two-dimensional, but that's not always the case, because once it's in your hands and you're looking through it, now it's in your hands and it's three-dimensional. And I just encourage you to think of it that way, and to explore the possibilities of what that could actually mean in terms of your ability to share and to connect with your donors.
And if I may add before we advance to the next slide, this is a perfect opportunity also what Mark was talking about, the package itself. This is a perfect example of where the art and the science meet. There's, we were talking about this in a meeting recently about the impact certain images have and how that triggers a behavior. So with direct mail, again, since it's very tangible, it's in your hands, it has something that's, it touches us on like a psychological level that isn't necessarily something that you get from a digital. So that's one of the reasons I think also direct mail is so important, because of you experience something physical.
Yep, I love that. It's it's present. It's in your hands. Yeah. I love that. All right, and then and the other thing I'd want to say, this goes into like the long-term approach and the repeatability and the sustainability. And this is really essentially a slide about long-term value. And what we're seeing here are actual collected data from our own internal surveys and client surveys and collated information. So we did a longitudinal study over like 5 years and collected long-term value information. So we answered the question, how much are your new donors providing over a 5-year period? So these numbers are based on those actual that actual captured data. So we can use this within the context of our clients to project long-term value based on acquisition. So it's obviously the first gift here, the first column shows first gift, and you can see how sensitive long-term giving is to that initial gift. So that can play into your strategy for acquisition. We have different types of control packages. Think of direct response package that's trying to get a lower medium level donor to build out your donor file at that level, and build out your farm team for future sustaining givers, repeat monthly givers, possible major donor prospects, as well as getting medium and higher level donors. And then this last slide here for me, and then we'll pass it off to Carmen to talk a little bit more about digital specifically. But direct mail is it's a machine. It's a fundraising workhorse, and it gets attention and responses. So, and this slide just shows some examples of that, how many people within, and let's remember demographically who are the donors, who are the givers, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, but typically she's female and she's elderly or middle-aged to elderly, and has discretionary as well as long-term or legacy giving potential. So this last chart gives just an example of how in that demographic how direct mail is favored and useful.
If I may, on this slide as well, we're also finding that younger generations, the digital native generations, they're also very interested, and they also surprisingly favor direct mail. They like to get direct mail from brands and from organizations that they support, nonprofit organizations. And that's a good thing, because that means that pipeline of donors will continue to be filled. It's not going to go away, and you'll be able to reach them through direct mail and through integrated sources. So they're not, the digital natives are not just all about digital. They actually like having that tangible piece of direct mail package in their hands.
And that's a great example of where direct mail is supporting the digital. It's a mutually beneficial relationship there. And the one common thread I draw between those different audiences that we were talking about is that fundraising is personal. It's in an ideal perfect world, we would fundraise one-on-one. And we do that at certain levels. We just don't have the resources and the staffing to do that everywhere with everyone. So the best direct response fundraising is going to try to emulate that personal relationship as best as possible, using personalization and good strategy. All right, I'm going to pass it off to you, Carmen.
All right, thank you. So we're going to start off with a quote, and this quote comes from the head of direct response at American Philanthropic, Eric Strife. And he basically says, it's a proven fact that nonprofits that create a multi-channel experience by integrating digital outreach and direct mail are more likely to increase donor retention and improve total giving per donor. He's a huge proponent of multi-channel fundraising, integrated fundraising. And I encourage you to take a look at many of his articles on Philanthropy Daily. And we can provide a link to his articles at the end of the webinar and in the follow-up emails. So we'll move on to the next slide. Okay. So on this slide, the key point and takeaway is that there was a study done by Next After on response rate lift. And what they found is that for the donors who received both direct mail and email, the response rate had a 60% lift as opposed to the group who only received direct mail. So you can see the synergy and how each supports the other in fundraising efforts. And the reason for this is that they're better together. It reinforces the message, and you're providing multiple opportunities for prospects and donors to act. So there's not only one point where your nonprofit is communicating with them, they have multiple opportunities to engage with the nonprofit. And there's a potential that this results in a higher average gift. An example, this is a composite example from some work we've done recently. We had an email campaign for a client, and it was part of a larger direct mail effort. And when they sent out an email, they received a reply actually to that email from one of their previous donors who up until that point had their average gift was under $5,000. So he actually replied back to the email that was sent out to him, and he informed them that there was going to be a $15,000 check coming their way. And that was a really powerful moment. And I like to think, well, maybe the donor may have given the same amount, but looking at this person's past history, it was under $5,000 on average, and now we were looking at a $15,000 gift. And he actually replied to the email. That was an immediate reaction. He got the email went out, and just a little bit after, the organization got an email reply saying, hey, $15,000 check in the mail. So you're going to advance to the next one. So we already discussed how direct mail and email are really good. They're a superpower combination. But email, direct mail, and digital, that's even more powerful. The Printing Alliance Foundation, they did a study and they found that the average response rate for direct mail only was 6%. When you combine direct mail with digital and email, that was a 37% average response rate. Again, proving that multiple touch points with repetition, that's the other thing. There's a lot of repetition going on here of the message. It's proven effective. And I believe I saw a question earlier in the Q&A box regarding how many times, how many touch points. So research has shown it takes about 18 to 20 touch points to reach a potential donor for the first time using an integrated method. So using an integrated method, you're increasing your opportunity and the chances that you're going to get a first-time donor faster than if you only had one channel or even two channels that you're communicating with the prospective donor or even a current donor to upgrade their donation giving. And we talked about this earlier, having all these multiple channels. We're driving people to the channels where they prefer to be on. Some people may get email and that's not, they'll look at it. They may look at it while they're at work on lunch, but they may prefer to be on, say, Facebook. That's where all their friends and families are. And if they see a communication from your organization in the feed, they're likely to stop scrolling and to take notice. This is also, doing an integrated campaign gives the organization a coordinated messaging and promotion across all channels, which means that for every time that you're engaging with that prospect or that donor, you're warming them up for the next thing. So if it's a prospective donor, you're taking maybe a cold lead at some point, and you're warming them and helping them kind of gently helping them down the path to becoming donors. And the same can be said for donors who've only given once to get into that second gift. And for donors who've given before, maybe upgrade them to the next tier of donor giving. And something that I really stress is that having an integrated and coordinated multi-channel campaign reduces the risk of revenue loss. And what I mean by that is if you only send out direct mail, and that's the only way you're communicating with prospective donors or current donors, it can get lost in the mail. That's happened. You can put it on a kitchen island. So what if, it gets piled under a lot of other mail or misplaced, you don't see it. So that's it until maybe the next time that the organization contacts them. And same thing with email. What if it goes to the junk folder? If there was direct mail, they would have maybe got that. And what if, the direct mail and the email don't come through? Well, you're going to get through to them on Facebook. You're going to cover your bases. So some way, somewhere, you're going to be able to interact with them because you have so many multiple channels to engage with prospective and current donors. And I'm going to add in here to spread this out even further, because we're talking a lot of stuff that's kind of organic, but you also want to do like paid ads. So if Facebook's algorithm decides they don't want to show your post in their feed, you can get around that by buying ads or boosting a post on Facebook. And one additional thing that's a real benefit as well is if you have an integrated plan, you can also focus group. You can use digital to test out creatives and messaging and offers, and then deploy that in your direct mail.
Yeah, we had a good example of that, Carmen. It's funny that you mentioned that. Just recently this spring with one of our clients, we tested out an offer independent of the direct mail channel. We led with digital, and it was the strongest email. We were led with email. It was the strongest email campaign we'd done for this particular client. We'd done together, and so we immediately followed up with a direct mail package on the same theme, and it was once again the best direct mail package we did. So there's definitely a case to be made for employing email as a test bed. And also I would say that, and don't forget, I think mobile messaging can also play a role in this too. Depending on the client, there's some real opportunities there to build a strong campaign focus, raise presence of mind, be there at the right time, at the right moment, with the right message. And also I would just bring up, we're talking about campaigns, and campaigns are useful for us as fundraisers because they have a beginning and an end, and we can plan them out and have all of our strategies executed in order. But there's also something to be said for the always on campaign, which is basically something that runs all year long. It's essentially a king of the hill type offer. And you could see that in terms of how acquisition runs, especially for larger programs where you're running multiple acquisition drops during the year and you have a king of the hill control package. That's almost like the direct mail example of an always on. And you can have the same equivalent thing happening in email, even more so because it's every day when it comes to email and digital offers.
And in the for-profit sector where I came from to American Philanthropic, it's continuous. It's always a never-ending having campaigns throughout the year, and always being in touch with, in the for-profit world, it's your consumer or prospective consumer, and for us in the nonprofit, it's prospective donors and our donors, constantly being there and having them aware of what we're doing.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. I have a lot of thoughts after all of that, but I'll share just one, which is something that Carmen said reminded me of in terms of risk mitigation and just taking every chance you can to get in front of donors. I did have a client recently. We did a direct mail campaign with email follow-up campaign on it, and one of their donors printed out the email we sent and put it in an envelope with the reply form from the mail package with a pretty decently sized check in it. So he's an older donor who's always given through the mail, but this time I guess it was the third email that finally got to him and made him make the donation, which is was kind of surprising.
He still used his preferred channel though.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. A good question that we got on that, actually, I want to hear your thoughts on, if we're doing an integrated campaign, firing on all cylinders and trying to echo the same messaging, how do we do that without getting redundant or repetitive? How do we write emails and letters and social posts that aren't just saying the exact same thing over and over?
I like to refer to it as part of the integrated marketing and fundraising plan. Out of that comes what's called an editorial calendar or an integrated communications calendar, where you have pillars of content, some things that are always going to be fresh, and then things that are that have a long shelf life. So by being able to plan that out, and think of it like a magazine. I always use an analogy. Think of it as a magazine or a newsroom. There are things that are constantly changing. So you want to have at least 4 to 5 content pillars, and then a place for things that are trending, because you want to be able, you don't want to have something that's so inflexible that if something breaks on the news about your nonprofit, that you're stuck with whatever you have in your content pillars. You want to be able to be flexible, and you want to be able to leverage whatever's trending and use it to the advantage of the nonprofit. So those are thinking like a magazine, really thinking from a publisher's point of view. That's going to help keep things fresh.
Yeah, and I would add, we did a campaign recently, just launched it for one of our clients, and it was a truly multi-channel integrated campaign. And the way it played out in terms of the strategy, we iterated on it a little bit, made some changes and tweaks as we were going along, just for practical considerations and to try to take advantage of the timeline and the constraints that we were setting for ourselves. But within that, we did a major direct mail campaign launch of a major donor giving tiers. So we're talking starting at $1,000, going all the way up to $100,000. Now, of course, we exposed that to the larger end of the file, but for the lower end of the file, we did something a little different, and we did something that was appropriate to them and gave them an option. We talked about the $1,000. It's cumulative giving, $1,000. You could accomplish that over the span of a year as a mid-level donor. But for the mid-level file and lower level file, we made a gift of any amount offer, and they could get a lapel pin, as a way to say thank you for their gift, and they could still be a part of the campaign. And then we also did, of course, emails, but we tied it into a teletown hall event. So this is where we use telecommunications, and we didn't talk about the donor club per se in the promotions leading up to the teletown hall, but the teletown hall talked about, it was newsy, inner circle kind of thing. And out of 17,000 donors in the house file list, we got 6,000 of them to log into the teletown hall, which was awesome. And 35%, which is, we were told is 10% more than what's typical. So that was an example where we're leading the in-home date for the mail package. And that included not just emails to promote it, but voice broadcast messaging. So the executive signing the letters left a short, 20, 40 to 40-second message saying, hey, I really want you there. We also did a text message right before the teletown hall happened. And then we did some outbound calls to get people in the door and make that happen. So that's, fingers crossed, but that's in the middle. That's hitting mailboxes right now. I just got my live sample, but that's an example where the content, the way it was presented was very different, because the teletown hall had talked about new initiatives. It was very much almost ran kind of like a radio show. We had questions coming in. We had, you couldn't do something like multiple choice survey questions on the phone. So as people can it could be interactive. But then the caboose of the conference call was the donor club. And hey, we have a special announcement for you that you're going to be getting this piece of mail. You know what I mean? So you could see how that's like, it's the same offer. It's just being creatively thought out ahead of time to say, how can we make this just part of a wonderful, exciting thing? And you see, that's the thing that you want. You want to be entertaining. You want to be fresh, and you want to be creative, and that's where the art side of it comes in.
And that's one thing that to keep in mind for anybody pursuing an integrated solution to their fundraising. Take into consideration the platforms. The platforms are going to drive a lot of how you're going to, for example, something that may work in email probably isn't going to work on Instagram or Facebook. Messaging is important. You have key messages. That's something that must not be forgotten. But those key messages can be dressed up any way you want. And that's the key thing to keep in mind. And there's something for anybody who wants to get started, and there's a small way to get into integrated fundraising if they haven't started already, is to do what we call bookend emails. We have a pre-email that teases what's coming in direct mail to let people know that, hey, check your mailboxes. And then there's one that follows up. It's kind of a reminder, you got the letter. We're excited, thank you for supporting us. And it's another option, an opportunity to ask again if you haven't heard back. So ask again, and reinforces that communication engagement. And I think if your organization hasn't done anything, it's a really easy way to get started, and then you can branch out from there.
Similar to that, what are your thoughts on using QR codes in mail pieces that'll direct to a landing page? Are you seeing these used more often? Are they a good idea?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the landing page, because that's something that I did want to touch on. Whatever you're doing to drive prospective donors or donors to say, for example, your website, always have in mind that we talked about the channels, but those channels need to lead somewhere. And that's usually a landing page where people are going to be given the option to take some kind of action. Most likely we want them to donate, right? So it's really important that when you're thinking about and every effort that you undertake, not just the channel and the packaging for that channel, but how you're developing the landing page so that it converts, because you've done all this work. You've got the email, you got the direct mail, you've done all social, and then you lose them at the landing page. It's very important that a holistic approach is taken from channel to channel, and getting it. Think of it like you're going on a trip. You know where you are. And for us, we know where the donor's at. Say they just got an email, but it doesn't end with the email. We want them to take an action, which takes them to the landing page. And the landing page has to be developed so that it converts. It needs to trigger a behavior in the person who's visiting to take the next action, which is to donate, and maybe an array of donation or do a donor club. So those are really important. And that goes back to the QR scan code. I've seen more and more of them being used because the technology is nicer and it's easier to use now. But I also see links. I see links to websites and campaign landing pages.
Yeah, the touchless menus during COVID had something to do with it as well, where people are more acclimatized to using it, and they see, oh, this is easier. It was kind of clunky at first. I don't know if you remember, years back when it was first introduced. That's changed. But also with touchless menus, I think I would guess the majority of people on this webinar have experienced that themselves and realized, oh, that was kind of easy to get to that menu on my phone. Everyone's got a phone, So the QR code, it's interesting. Eric Strife was doing a split test. I haven't seen results from it yet, but it was that very thing. It was a 50-50 split between a QR code on the reply form in a direct mail piece and no QR code. So it'll be fascinating to find out how that does. Maybe Eric will do another blog post.
Yeah, that's great. If you're wondering about QR codes, you can send me an email, and once we have data, I'll let you know. But we'll try to get a Philanthropy Daily post up about that, which should be great to have.
I would also encourage the participants and the attendees on this call to look at their own world. Look at what's reaching you in your home through direct mail. I get all kinds of catalogs, and it ranges from diverse brands. Look at how they're doing things. If they're doing it, it's because it's working, because they're looking to make money, and everything they put out there, I can guarantee you, having come from that world, that it's tested and optimized. So see, just take a look and kind of look at it from a different perspective. Like, I'll get my Sephora catalog now that I'm learning and doing more with direct mail, and I notice things that I didn't notice before. It's like, oh, clever. They're guiding me to their website or their app, which I love too, because you can also, if you have an app for your organization, you can use digital and direct mail to get them to the app and take direct action.
So if we compare the response rate on digital only versus an integrated campaign, is the ROI actually going to be better if we send a mail piece too? Or if we keep all the cost of mailing out, do you think digital only is going to be better?
That's there's so many different studies on that. One thing that I like to bring up is that direct mail does have a higher response rate than, say, email. Email has a very low response rate, but study after study shows that email has a higher return on investment. If you're just looking at one key performance indicator, what they don't tell you when you read these studies is what the cost of emailing is, because it's not free. And sometimes people think that it's almost free, and it's not. There's a lot of expenses that go into it. So organizations, again, in the for-profit sector, we look at all those costs, and it's because I've seen some studies where there was some that were like 140%. I'm like, no, that return on investment is not 140%. You're just not counting all the expenses. But that's something that's easily, you can easily determine that within your own organization too, by looking at the cost and what the return on investment is based on that. And
And plus, yeah, whenever the ROI question comes up, I mean, ROI is an important metric. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the only metric, and it's not necessarily the metric you should be leading with. And when you focus on one metric, particularly ROI, it could lead you astray if you're not careful. And what I mean by that is, like, think of it from a business perspective. What is our job as fundraisers? What are we paid to do? And if I would give like the short answer of that, it's to raise net funds, net monies for programs. That's what we do. So in that sense, there's a metric called net income. And so like Mike, I turn the question back and say, do you think you can raise more net income that way? And usually the answer is yes. So why wouldn't you do it?
Mm-hmm. And then retention rate too, right? If you're hitting them both.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to simplify it just to that one question, the immediate question, but there's a whole host of other good reasons for why you would do that. It plays into that bullet list that I gave of why we do direct mail, all the positive attributes. So you just go back and look at that list, and that'll answer that question.
And when you're looking at an integrated campaign, it's the same as if you were building out a strategy for direct mail alone. You need to define what the key performance indicators are and which ones are going to be important, and not get hung up on just one, because there's a variety of them that need to be looked at and in combination. So that's what I would recommend to.
Yeah, and if you really want to kind of, the context is important, and it depends on what's going on strategically at your particular organization. What's your strategic development plan? What does that say? Do you have one? What's the, I love the term, I learned this from Eric, BHAG. What's your BHAG? And that's an acronym. It stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And that plays into the strategic development plan is always going to have some kind of a big goal if it's stretching you the way it should. So these kinds of strategies are going to play into how aggressive you're going to be, how much acquisition you're going to do, are you going to be placing ads? All these decisions roll up into those goals, so that you can always trace back why you're doing what you're doing, trace it back to a strategic goal.
And that's so important, because in the end, what this really, having a strategic vision and having the plans in place, is that it's going to help you forecast budgets for the coming years and know about your cash flow, which is really important. And this last year, 2020 with COVID, has taught nonprofits and for-profits the same thing, that the importance of knowing that you have stable cash flow coming in. For example, there was a study, a recent article actually about a really big nonprofit in Washington State that every year put on this incredible gala, and they usually would bring in $100,000, $200,000, and their gala was 2 days after the nation shut down because the emergency act that, hey, everybody stay home. They scrambled to get something together, because the key thing is that they had strategic vision, and they knew that the gala was one way of going, but they knew that there were other channels because they knew what the vision was. So the tactical wasn't that hard. They just pivoted, and what they found is they went online with this thing. They had a silent auction. They did everything online, and even sponsorship online. And they, I think they brought in like $350,000, which eclipsed what they had brought in the year before with the in-person. Plus, they didn't have all those expenses, so their return on investment was much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a good point. I mean, sort of the elephant in the room, which is a good plug for, in a couple months, we'll be talking about strategic planning, but all of this only makes sense in the context of a plan, right? It doesn't just start with sending an email here or there, haphazardly or reactively, but by planning. So stay tuned. We'll talk about that later. To Carmen's point about that organization, we had an article in Philanthropy Daily, which you can find a couple months ago, about how these are actual organizations, how they fared they're anonymized, obviously, but how they fared during COVID. One with a plan that pivoted, managed to raise more money, did really well, and one that didn't have a plan and was, solvent prior to COVID. But then when things changed, they didn't know what to do. They didn't have anything to rely on, and they suffered a great deal financially through that whole period. So planning is paramount. But for now, here's a good question. Maybe some quick tactics from you guys. How do we actually get donors' email addresses? Who wants to give you an email? How do I get that?
there's so many different ways. You're talking about through, if they get something from direct mail, there are various channels. And one of the ways you can do it is you could just ask them, put it in the direct mail. And sometimes it could be accompanied by an offer. But if they're already giving you their home address and their phone number, which I would recommend, if you can get those phone numbers, because then you can leverage text and SMS messaging, or I'm sorry, and messaging apps. So that's really helpful. But there are many ways, and if they're not, if they're on Sam Social, and are you talking about just established donors now or acquisition as well?
I would be interested in either, right? So yeah, so an active donor, how are we going to get theirs? Or yeah, maybe we're trying to get a new email address and then eventually convert them into a donor further.
Active donors are going to, I think, in my experience, even with consumers, it's a lot easier to get more information from them. And it's a nurturing thing, because you want to be able to reduce the friction as much as possible to get as much information as you can. But active donors are already warmed up there. They're happy to be working with the organization, so much easier for them. For acquisition, there's various ways of doing it. You can do acquisition campaigns through direct mail, and I'll have Mark can cover that. But as far as digital, you can work through using social. Social is a great way. Facebook is a great way with their ads for acquisitions. And you can also do acquisitions by something as simple as finding like-minded organizations that align on mission. Some of them have newsletters that they sell space in. And I found that helps too. You can actually target, and you can also do email rental lists to organizations that align with your organization's mission. And you can acquire emails and other detail, but usually it's easier just to ask for a first name, a last name in the email. And then through what's sometimes called a drip campaign, you can, again, we go talk about the path, the journey. We start taking them down this journey. The more they get to know you and the trust is built up, they're more comfortable giving you an address. They're more comfortable giving you a phone number. So those are the kind of things that, again, goes back into planning. You should be able to plan all this out. So I'm gonna hand it over to Mark. He's got a lot of knowledge on
plan it out, but also test it. Like one of my favorite things to do, because you have to offer something to get something, right? There's that idea of, because remember, this is a personal one-on-one relationship. So if you want to get their email, what are you going to give them for it? And one of my favorite things to do is to offer an ebook. So if your organization, if your program has ebook offers or can find something that's appropriate to your mission and mission centric, that's a great thing to test. I think newsletters in the direct mail channel are a great way to capture emails. Again, you could do ebook offers through that as well. Hey, send us your email, we'll send you this ebook. It feels really natural, feels good, because if you pick the right offer, it's actually supporting your mission, and that's where fundraising also becomes program, right? So those would be the like low-hanging fruit I would recommend testing.
Yeah.
And remember what we said earlier about an always-on program. So your email acquisition is a king of the hill, kind of want to find the very best offer that captures the most emails, right? So in terms of your ads on social and what you're putting out there, and what's on your website, what's the best, definitely on the homepage, the idea of having a pop-up or something that offers the email and have some kind of rationale for that would be compelling for them. So there needs to be some kind of an offer associated with it. Typically, those are the best ones.
Yeah, that's the main thing that we learned is always to make like one small change that we've made in some reply forms in the mail for clients is, instead of just having a line that says name and email or phone, something like that, but preface it with something that would just make it sound like they're getting something out of it. So if you have an offer like an ebook, that's awesome. But even if you just preface it like, yes, I'd love to hear more about what you're doing to fight poverty or cure disease, whatever it is, make it sound like they're going to get something, or I'd love to hear more from you. Put that in there so that they're not just giving you their email transactionally, but, or sort of in a sterile way, but for a reason to get something out of you. We are already running out of time here. One last question, which neither of you are going to like, but it's an important question we always get. Highly designed emails or plain text emails? What should organizations be sending, Carmen?
That's really interesting. It depends. And you do want to test that. But I find that both work really well, and it depends, again, on what the purpose of the message is. What is it you want to accomplish? And actually, we just had this with a campaign that I'm working on right now. This organization is launching a new program, and they're letting all their donors at certain levels know about it. So it's kind of an exclusive club. So with that one, instead of being highly designed and with all the wow factor, we actually opted for a very plain message, like it came from someone's directly from their email, but it's packaged in an HTML format. It doesn't look like, you know, something that's HTML, but it has all the functionality with HTML, which will help you with tracking and the metrics. But it looks like something he just, you know, dashed off, you know, in Outlook or whatever email client he's using and sending out to those special donors. So again,
what I love about that, Carmen, is just there's a direct corollary to direct mail, in that, you know, there's two different buckets that I think of when it comes to like commercial, highly designed pieces, and then very personal pieces. You know, you've heard the term plain Jane envelope. It's just a white envelope. It's meant to look like a personal letter. And those are kind of the two buckets that I think of. Is this piece commercial in look? Does it have photos on it? Is it designed? A lot of pieces are, of course, but I look for opportunities to say, okay, when can we do a handwritten note? When can we do, you know, from the desk of letter? You know, when can we do something that looks? I've done a 9x12 envelope with just, you know, no logo. It's got the return address up there and the name of the organization and everything, but that's it. It could have been typed up on a 9x12, you know, and then everything inside sort of follows suit. So that's how I think of it, is in terms of, well, test everything, because but personal is pretty strong and effective if you use it well.
Yeah, I think so. That kind of gets like the key thing that I heard you point out, Carmen, which I forgot. I should have known you would say. But obviously test everything, but also answer this first question: what are we trying to do, right? Is it in mail? Is it acquisition, or is it a solicitation? Is it a, you know, renew solicitation? Is it a re-engagement strategy? An email? Are we trying to get them to go somewhere, give us something, answer something, engage in some way? The first question: what do you want them to do? And then after that, well, you got to test and figure out for your organization. I hate to cut us off, but it's already been an hour, and that went by very quickly. And I'm sure both of you would tell us we've only barely scratched the surface. So the one piece of good news I have for everybody who wants to learn a little more, I just dropped in the chat box a link to our masterclass. So if here in the webinar, we're just scraping the surface, the masterclass is a chance a little bit more intimately to sit down for 3 hours and really dig into the details of direct response fundraising and more hands-on with your organization. That'll be on July 15th at 1:00 Eastern time. It'll be with Carmen again and Spencer Cashmanian, who is now the chief of staff at the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. He used to work with us at American Philanthropic for several years. So you can follow that link. You can sign up there if you'd like, and get in a lot further, get a lot more detail about all of this. Also, check out philanthropydaily.com. You can see a series of articles from Carmen about integrated fundraising, a series of articles from Eric Streif about digital fundraising. And then if you just search around, you'll find a lot of resources to help you, whether you're doing direct mail, foundations, major gifts, whatever it is, we've got it all there. I'll send you a recording, but always please do send me emails with any questions you have. We look forward to helping you out. Thanks very much, everyone, for being with us. And thank you, Mark and Carmen.